Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Islam Answers back here with another great video for you. Don't forget to like and follow. Remember, the notes on this video and on my other videos are available on my Patreon to help you counter and refute the Christian missionaries. Click the link that you see here. It is available on my profile. Click it there. All right, thank you. Now, this one, we're going to here lay to rest that argument that these Christians keep using, thinking that they have something when they are attempting to refute the idea of Jesus being Muslim. They make this argument that, well, Jesus can't be a Muslim because he called God Father, and Muslims are not allowed to call God Father. But Christians, sorry to hurt your feelings, however, the evidence suggests that Jesus actually did not call God Father. And therefore, your attempt to use this argument to rebuttal the claim that Muslims are making that Jesus was a Muslim, i.e. someone who submitted to God, are baseless, because the evidence suggests that Jesus actually may have never actually called God a father in the first place. Let us examine the evidence. I'm going to show you what your scholarship has to say about it, and then I'm going to show you proof that you're from within your own biblical text that there was a manipulation of Jesus' words to make him start to say God was Father, but earlier statements show that he actually did not say that, thereby proving that this claim that Jesus called God Father is a later Christian corruption, a later Christian manipulation. Again, your own scholarship is going to reveal this. So let's get started and let's knock this argument out of the park. Here we go. So first, according to the Oxford Dictionary of the Bible by W.R.F. Browning, he informs us, and I'll let it speak. He says, although Christians attributed divine sonship to Jesus as the Messiah after the resurrection, the tendency was to push its usage ever earlier, such as to push it to the baptism by John, when John baptizes Jesus in Mark chapter 1, verse 1, or the transfiguration to Mark 9:7, or even before his birth. So as you can see here, your own scholarship is saying that apparently the earliest claims of Jesus being the Son of God was after the resurrection. By the way, you can see this in Romans chapter 1, verse, I believe it's Romans 1:4, right? Where Paul, who you may not know, is actually the earliest writer of the New Testament before the Gospels. So this is where they say that Jesus is first identified as the Son of God, but it's identified after the resurrection, as if to imply that he was not always believed to be the Son of God eternally, but became the Son of God after the resurrection. And so here, Oxford Dictionary of the Bible by Mr. Browning is informing us that Christians try to push this idea to an earlier point in time, rather than when it first appeared apparently after the resurrection. Christians tried to push this idea or push this usage to an earlier time, such as when Jesus is baptized in Mark or in Matthew or in Luke. So therefore, therefore, I don't want to see a bunch of comments and say, oh yeah, it was used earlier. Look, in Mark, he was baptized and the voice said, yeah. But again, as you can see here, this was clearly some later manipulation of the story of Jesus, trying to push it to an earlier time, whereas the earlier Christians apparently used it first after the resurrection. Now look, now we're going to turn to HarperCollins Bible Dictionary. HarperCollins Bible Dictionary, edited by Paul J. Archtmeyer. He says that although the synoptic traditions contain two sayings in which Jesus refers to himself as Son in relation to God as his Father, the authenticity of these sayings is widely questioned, and it remains uncertain whether Jesus actually called himself Son in relation to God as his Father. I think it's very clear. So these statements of Jesus that are in your Gospels, where he claims to refer to himself as Son in relation to God as his Father, are, according to HarperCollins Bible Dictionary, the authenticity is widely questioned of these statements, and it remains uncertain whether Jesus actually called himself Son of God in relation to God as his father. Therefore, if your own scholarship is saying that the authenticity is questioned and it is actually uncertain whether Jesus actually called himself son and called God his father, we won't accept it either. We won't accept it from you either. Therefore, your claim that Jesus couldn't be a Muslim because he called God father is off the table. It's null and void. Your own scholarship is telling you that these statements are not authentic and uncertain. Let's continue. HarperCollins goes on to say, the evidence suggests that in spite of its presence in the Synoptic Gospels, the title did not come into use until after Easter at the resurrection of Jesus. Again, just like the other one just told, just like Oxford Dictionary of the Bible told you, in when he was appointed the Son of God in Romans chapter 1, verse 4 by Paul. Remember, that writing of Paul is earlier than your Gospels. It's earlier than your Gospels, okay? So, again, we are told that the evidence suggests that this usage of Son of God did not come into use until after Easter, okay? HarperCollins Bible goes on, Dictionary of the Bible goes on to say further, in the course of time, the moment at which Jesus was appointed son in this functional sense was pushed back to his baptism in Mark chapter 1, verse 11, when he hears the voice. So again, as you can see, just like Oxford Bible, Dictionary of the Bible told us, that the Christians are trying to push this idea to an earlier period, whereas however, it was only apparently first used after the resurrection. So then Christians tried to manipulate the text and manipulate the story and manipulate the words of Jesus and push it. They're trying to push it to an earlier time, such as Mark. So again, don't come to me and say, oh, well, look, it is earlier. It's in Mark. No, as you can see here, both Oxford Dictionary of the Bible and Collins are telling us that this was pushed to an earlier time. So this is basically a manipulation. So we won't accept this, okay? It goes on to say further, and such terms such as prophet or servant were used to indicate that in his earthly lifetime, Jesus had appeared as God's agent or prophet. Son of God simply takes over the duty of these earlier titles. So again, earlier titles were God's agent or prophet, and then they made Son of God take over those particular duties and titles. It goes on further. In the birth narratives of Matthew and Luke, the title Son of God again is shifted back to his conception or his birth or the infancy of Jesus. And lastly, there's a growing consensus among scholars that the pre-existent Christology originated not with the title Son of God, but with the identification of Jesus as the personal incarnation of the divine wisdom. All this adds up to tell us that this claim of Jesus calling God Father is something that was of a later manipulation, and Christians tried to push it back to an earlier time. But again, this pushing it back, as we heard, is not authentic, and the attempts to make Jesus say that God was his father are not authentic. Okay, and look, I'm going to now show you proof of this. Take a look at Mark chapter 3, verse 35. Here in Mark 3:35, Jesus is said to say right here that those who are his brothers and sisters are those who do the will of God. Notice he says will of God. Now look how Matthew tries to change, manipulates, and corrupt Jesus' words and changes it to those who do the will of God. Those who are my brothers and sisters are those who do the will of my Father. Very clear. Look, it's very obvious. Look at it. A very clear and obvious manipulation and corruption of the words of Jesus. It is changed in Mark, it is in Mark as the will of God. Matthew changes it to make Jesus say those who do the will of my Father. A clear manipulation of the text. But however, we can take a look at Luke 2, Luke chapter 8:21, where Luke seems to agree with Mark that Jesus said those who do the will of God are my brothers and sisters. So this is a proof that here is what we see from both these Bible dictionaries, that there is a manipulation of the words of Jesus, a corruption of his words, where he is earlier saying that God, he just refers to God, but Matthew manipulates it to make Jesus say, my Father. Clear corruption, but again, those statements are not authentic. Don't forget, like and follow. This argument is knocked out. You can't use it anymore, Christians. We won't accept it.